Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to my show, High Road to Humanity. In every episode, I tell you powerful true stories filled with great wisdom that you can use in your own life as you strive for a higher road to travel. My featured guests will have their own unique stories to tell that enlighten your mind and your soul. So kick back, relax, and learn the secret to success when you take the high road.
First touch, strong connection, it lays deep in your soul.
Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to High Road to Humanity. And we've got a really interesting subject today. We're going to talk about some alternatives to vaccines today. And I have Cilla Whatcott here, and I say that a bunch of times, but here's her book, and I have a bunch of different pages marked, and she's going to tell us about the natural remedies that we can do. You know, a lot of people have issues with just giving their kids, the measles, mumps, and rubella. And so she's going to talk about the natural alternative. And before we even get started, let me just say that we are not giving medical advice today. And we're just talking about some natural alternatives. So make sure that, anything that we talk about today, that you do check with your physician and that you do your own research. Okay. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. Now, before I bring Cilla on, I want to talk about what's happening with Israel. Israel ground, this is the headline, Israeli ground troops carrying out strikes into Gaza Strip, IDF says. Now I'm going to read a little of this. And as somebody said to me, made a comment, why don't I say enough about these things? Well, I'm going to say something about this today because I think intuitively, I feel like what's happening over in Jerusalem, in Israel right now, where they're trying to fire on Jerusalem and they are firing into Israel, I think, and the Palestinians are doing this, and I think this is a real problem. And this hasn't happened for quite a few years. I think it's been 7 years. So intuitively, I feel like this is a big deal and we need to pay attention to what's going on. But it says, London and Cairo, Israel's military have both its air and ground forces are firing into the neighborhood Gaza Strip as the latest round of fighting with Hamas. The Palestinian militant group ruled the blockade territory continued for a 4 straight night. So it's been going on for 4 nights. Now, they're saying that ABC News heard early Friday that tanks and artillery are now striking targets in the Gaza Strip from the Israeli side of the border. In addition to fighter jets overhead, however, there were currently no Israeli boots on the ground in the Palestinian territory, as was erroneously announced by the Israeli Defense Forces late Thursday. So it goes on to say that so far 103 people, including 27 children and 8 women, have been killed in the Gaza Strip. Since tensions escalated Monday, at least 580 others have been injured, according to the Palestine Ministry of Health. The last word was said that the operation will continue as long as necessary, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a statement early Friday. So meanwhile, a total of 7 people, including a soldier and 6-year-old child, have been killed in Israel, and more than 150 others have been wounded in Israel. So this goes back and forth. And my feeling on this, like I said before, and Cilla, you're welcome to chime in here if you want to, is that this is going to continue, and I think it's going to escalate. What's your opinion on this one?
Well, it's interesting that you start with this, Nancy, because this militaristic mentality that we as humans embrace is part of the problem and part of what civilization needs to grow out of and overcome. And my topic of homeoprophylaxis really suits that mindset, because instead of having this us against them attitude about germs and disease and viruses, like we have to fight these things and kill these things, and homeoprophylaxis really embraces the mindset that we live in concert with all of these microbes, and we need to learn how to do that in the most effective way, in a way that we become adaptive to these things. We know
just
that
like
our bodies,
the Israelis and the Palestinians, need to live in harmony with each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we embrace militaristic language and behavior, it's not beneficial.
Right.
So, this has been the history of the vaccine paradigm that we're going to eradicate a disease. Well, they're life forms. You don't eradicate disease.
Doesn't work like that, is what you're saying. I'm really glad you're here today. Well, there's one more thing that I pulled up on the internet. I mean, it's a hot news cycle. I was watching the news last night and I was really surprised, and I switch around. But the big news yesterday, and I have to get this out, was that the CDC director said the mask wearing will be hard to let go despite the new guidance. So they're saying now that you have a vaccine, and I can read this, but I'm just going to say, now that you have the vaccine, you don't have to wear your mask. Well, that makes a whole lot of sense. So they finally have come out and released us like we're little children. Okay, children, you can take off your mask if you've had the vaccine. Now, if you haven't had the vaccine, we don't know what we're going to do with you yet. But for the people who have had the vaccine, they can take their mask off. This just blows my mind. It's a real control situation. What's your feeling on this?
Yeah, I
I'm
would agree
curious.
with you. It's about control, following
Oh, yeah.
directions.
Oh, yeah.
And we know from the studies from the major pharmaceutical companies that the vaccine does not prevent transmission or contagion. It doesn't prevent that. So what are we doing with this? It
This
doesn't
is a
make any sense.
nightmare. Yeah,
Mhm.
well, it says right here, and I'm going to read just a little of this because, hey, just to humor everyone. Rochelle Walensky, director of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, said on Friday that mask wearing will be hard to let go. For some, and argued Americans should be allowed to part with their mask in their own due time, despite their agency's newly loosened guidance for the face covering. I'm sorry, I can hardly make it through that. The funny part to me was yesterday, I have a lot of followers on Facebook. I have a public page and I've got over 5,000 followers. And as soon as I heard this, I was home because I work out of my house. And I posted on Facebook, right? So I put this little mask and I was like, hey, we don't have to wear the mask. And like, people were afraid to respond.
They didn't know what to say. Interesting.
Yeah. They were like, oh, really? Is that true? Should we even respond to that? Will we
Right.
be condemned socially if we say anything? I'm sorry. That just blew my mind too. People are afraid. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to say
Right.
anything.
Well, the
I mean,
disease here, Nancy, is really fear.
yes,
That's what's so contagious.
I
That's what's
know.
really spreading amongst people. And that's generally what my message has been in the kind of work that I do, that there are things we can do to take control of ourselves and our health, and that we don't need to be living in fear.
Right. Well, I got about 5 minutes to commercial break here, but I want you, if you wouldn't mind, because you have an interesting story. Can you just tell a little bit about what happened to you and your children when you were, you were younger, you adopted some children, you had your own, and you ran into a situation, and this is what kind of stemmed this whole work. And I just want the audience to understand where you're coming from. So if you wouldn't mind, please.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I have 4 children. 3 of them are adopted from China, Russia, Taiwan, and one was a biological child of our own. And my Chinese daughter was failure to thrive. She was about 10 pounds at a year old. We picked her up from China she was around a year old, and brought her back. She was like a newborn. She could barely hold her head up.
Yeah.
And the pediatrician insisted on giving her all her vaccines. She was a year old, and I didn't question. I had vaccinated other children, and she immediately, her leg swelled up to twice the size. She was screaming a shrill scream. Her fever was about 105 Fahrenheit, and it was terrifying. Well, she was diagnosed with aseptic meningitis.
Yes.
And
Which you say is common, by the way.
it's in the Merck manual. This is back in 1995. And I had a Merck manual. We were living overseas in the Marshall Islands and did not have access to internet at the time.
Yeah, right.
And it was new. It was 95. So I had a Merck manual, and I looked, and it was listed as a side effect to the MMR vaccine. And I'm assuming it's also in the insert to the MMR vaccine.
Oh, okay. So
Aseptic
it was
meningitis.
known. It was known.
It was known. Yes.
Okay.
And I went to the pediatrician and thought she'd be so pleased with me because I figured out what it was. And the opposite was true. I was chastised and told that, people die from these diseases and couldn't possibly be that. So it was sort of a light bulb that went on for me. And I realized it was up to me to make choices for my children. Nobody was going to look out for my children like I was. And I started researching at that point. I hadn't yet been to homeopathy school. So I was just researching. And then I went to homeopathy school and learned about something called homeoprophylaxis, continued to research, going to conferences, reading papers, studies. The deeper I dove, the darker it got.
Well,
And
yeah, and let me just I'm going to stop you a second here because I really didn't read some of your background, and and I'm just going to read this really quick to the audience. Cilla, who has worked to help people in their natural ability to heal on their own, she's a prominent voice in the world of homeoprophylaxis, and specifically has how this can be effective immune support in use for deep healing and transformation within homeopathic medicine. So, with a PhD and a board certification in homeopathy, she has eloquently explained this beautiful science. Now, you've published articles in Pathways. There are links that I'll provide to Organic Lifestyle Magazine, all different things. You've been let's see, she was a recipient of a 2016 Public Service Award in the Weston A. Price Foundation for her work. She's been a guest lecturer in London, France, Scotland, Ireland, Indonesia, USA, and Canada. I mean, you've got quite a worldwide following here.
well, thank you for reading that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, parents are interested in another way. That's
yeah,
that's all we can see from that. Parents are interested in an
and something
alternative. They
different.
want their children to be safe.
All right. Hey, we've got to go to commercial break because we're doing the podcast here today too. But you guys, this is Nancy Yearold. I'm here today with Cilla Whatcott. Her book that we're looking at today is There Is a Choice. And it's Homeoprophylaxis, an appeal to mothers. Okay, you guys got to check this out. I have all these different places marked because there's really interesting information. This is High Road to Humanity, and we will be right back. Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and this is High Road to Humanity. And we're talking today about alternatives to getting the vaccine. And I wanted to ask you this question. So I have two daughters, and when they were young, I got them all the vaccines that they were supposed to. And when I was a youngster, I can remember getting that shot in the arm. We all have that where we actually have the scar, and I can remember being just a little kid and getting that, and it just scared me to death. But, we all got it. And that was pretty much how it was. Now, what you talked about, and I wanted to bring this up, and I can't remember if my kids got this or not, but they changed the vaccine. We used to just get measles, mumps, and rubella, but then there was hepatitis B that they added, and there was, is it varicella? Am I
Correct.
pronouncing it properly?
Mhm.
Okay, those were added to childhood immunizations. And
Right.
those two were kind of interesting. And I wondered if you would talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Hepatitis B was added in 1991,
Okay.
and there are three doses given. The first dose is given on the first day of life. And hepatitis B is a sexually transmitted disease or transmitted through sharing blood products, such as needles.
Needles and stuff.
So the risk of a 1-day-old baby contracting hepatitis B is 0.
Yeah, I'm just like, why? I just want to stop you there. Why would they do that on the first day of
For
life?
compliance. So by giving the first one on the day of birth and saying that the second one is due at 2 months, it assures that the parent brings the baby in at 2 months for a well child check. So this really seals the deal of compliance with parents to get them coming back for the second and third
So this
shot.
has nothing to do with the vaccine and how it's affecting the child. Well, it does, but this
That's
is blowing
correct. It
my
has
mind.
nothing to do with the welfare of the child, is the reality. It has nothing to do with the welfare of the child.
That's really young to give a baby
Yeah.
anything.
Well,
Okay.
and it's also full of aluminum. I mean, the level of aluminum is beyond the maximum amount as determined by the EPA to ingest. So
Okay.
the EPA doesn't have injectable amounts, but ingestion. And we know that ingestion is very different from injecting, that you can clear things that you ingest much more easily than something
Then you
that's
can.
injected directly into your system.
Okay.
And, you know, the on the vaccine schedule in the first 18 months, there's over 5,000 micrograms of aluminum. And
Why did they put aluminum?
aluminum is an adjuvant, and
Okay.
an adjuvant is something that stimulates antibody production. So it stimulates Th2 arm of the immune system,
Okay.
which causes the inflammation causes antibody production, but the problem is that it causes indiscriminate inflammation, so that we see increased cases of asthma, allergies, eczema, all the inflammatory illnesses, because it's being indiscriminately, manifested throughout the body.
That makes sense. That makes
So they
sense.
used to use thimerosal, which was mercury, and they reduced that significantly. Now there are trace amounts in some vaccines, which they do not have to report because it's a trace amount,
Okay.
but they don't have the same level of thimerosal, which was predominantly mercury.
Okay.
So they've claimed that they've taken it out, and instead they increased aluminum.
Now the varicella, what is
Oh,
that for? What is
yeah,
that?
that's very
Yeah.
interesting. That's for
Yeah.
chickenpox. So
Okay.
chickenpox is a benign childhood disease that we all got.
Yeah, I
Anybody.
mean, I got the shot, but I still got it and I got over it and I've got a few scars and we all do, right?
Yeah, and they're, these benign diseases that were designed by Mother Nature are there for a reason.
Okay.
And we see children gain developmental skills after contracting chickenpox, measles, mumps. They're either beginning to read after measles. We see that developmental skill fall into place. After chickenpox, there's some physical skills that start to develop.
Really?
So
I
Mother
didn't know.
Nature knew what she was doing. They're there for a reason.
God knew what
And
he was doing, huh?
yeah,
Shocker.
also it helps to prevent chronic diseases later in life. Neil Miller, who's written a book with a number of studies showing us that incidence of cancers and tumors and MS are reduced in people who have these benign childhood diseases. So they serve a specific purpose.
Interesting.
But what took place was the development of the chickenpox vaccine, varicella.
Okay.
And in 1995, they did a surveillance study to see how it was working in certain areas. So what one of the researchers found, his name was Gary Goldman,
Right.
he found that there were more cases of shingles.
Yeah.
Shingles, see, chickenpox, varicella is, it's a disease that stays in your system. And then later, as you come in contact with children, say your grandchildren or your students or your patients that have chickenpox, it reactivates it in your system in such a way as to give you an immune boost so that you stay healthy. So it
Okay,
has
so let me stop you a second. So we've always been given the vaccine for chickenpox. Why did they bring in varicella? I'm
no,
confused.
varicella is chickenpox.
Is chickenpox.
They're one and
Okay.
the same.
All right.
That
All right. So we've
it was
always
not rolled out till 1995. Before
okay.
that, there was not a varicella vaccine.
Okay. I
But
always thought we got okay. All right. Maybe I
no, we did
okay.
not.
No.
People got
Okay.
chickenpox. So Gary
Okay.
Goldman discovered this
Gotcha.
uptick in
Okay.
shingles, which is much more painful, much more dangerous, much more
Right.
threatening, much more expensive. And he brought the attention to the powers that be that had engaged him to do this survey. We
Okay.
can all guess who that is.
Okay.
And he was told, no, we'll just make a vaccine for shingles. We'll just
So
roll
that's
out a
here in the
vaccine.
United States. He was here in the
Correct.
United States and he went to, that Center of Disease Control or whoever he needed to
Correct.
go to say, hey, I've done this and this is a problem.
Here's a problem.
Mhm.
Here's a problem, raised a red
Mhm.
flag.
Okay.
And they basically stonewalled him and said,
No.
We'll just make a vaccine for shingles, which they
Well,
did.
yeah, yeah. Because
They
I see
rolled
that all
out.
the time. Yeah.
Right. It's the same as the varicella vaccine, but pumped up a little bit.
Okay.
So it's basically the same. And, proceeds are expanded because now not only a childhood population, but the adult population is receiving this vaccine. So he was ultimately stonewalled, ended up publishing in a European journal, and some of the European nations did not uh, put chickenpox on their schedule, the varicella vaccine on their schedule at
Okay.
all, because it was obvious that, yeah, it's detrimental. It's not helping anyone.
But they continue to do it because of the pharmaceutical companies who make a lot of money. And so this really comes down to dollars.
Yes, and they have no liability. So if you could make money on something and have absolutely no liability, what motivation do you have to make it safe?
Right. Well, there is, I have a conscience, and some people do have a conscience, and some people care about humanity. So, I mean,
Right,
not all of us would do that, but yeah, it's amazing what people will do for cash. It really
right.
is. And I think you started to realize all these things as you started to get into this work.
Connect the dots. You connect all the dots and you see the underlying reasons for things, and it's
Hmm.
disturbing.
It is disturbing to watch it all go on. And it's sad because, well, and I can remember my sister was, and I don't know, I thought this was interesting. She died about 10 or 11 years ago of leukemia, but she had gotten shingles. She was in her late 50s, early 60s. And she got shingles in the hospital, which I thought was interesting. And I knew it had come around a lot. And I thought, but it was odd. Or, so that's what's happening is older
Right,
people are whose
right,
immune systems are down like hers was. Is
right,
that
right. Well,
proper?
correct. As a retrovirus, it's in your system if you had chickenpox as a child. Then,
Right.
if you're under stress, it can manifest as shingles.
And that's what happens.
That's what
Okay. Which is
happens.
a horrible, horrible disease. A horrible,
It's much
horrible.
more painful than chickenpox.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, right now we're dealing with this vaccine that we are taking. There's been a lot of controversy over it. Um, I just want to know your feelings. People have not, I know a lot of these companies, there's all different companies that have, put out the vaccine for the issues that we're having here in the United States and around the world. I know they are supposed to test and all these things, but then I did see on a YouTube video where somebody was at a pharmacy and they were opening one of the vaccines, and I can't tell you which one it was for our COVID-19, and there were no instructions. It was all blank.
Interesting.
The paper, she showed it on YouTube. She was in the pharmacy and she was opening the boxes, and it was crazy. And it was a big piece of paper. I mean, she held it up and she folded it and showed us, unfolded the whole thing. There was nothing there.
Interesting. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a graphic representation of how
Wow.
much we know.
About
That's
this.
how much we have been informed about what's going on.
All
So
right.
good
We're
point,
gonna
Nancy.
yeah, we're going to commercial break and we'll be right back. Hey, I'm here today with Cilla Whatcott. Her book is There Is a Choice, Homeoprophylaxis, An Appeal to Mothers. This is Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity, and we will be right back. Hi, this is Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity. We're talking about vaccines. Well, what can people do? I mean, I want to know, what do you tell, you're a natural homeopathic doctor. I love what you do. It's holistic, it's natural. I'm into all the natural stuff. I'm into the oils. I really watch what I eat. I try to, people say don't use the microwave. I mean, there's all these different things that I'm into. Tell people today who have little babies and they come to you? I mean, what do you advise them to do?
Well, the first thing I do is try to support young mothers and help them to recognize that they possess the intuition to care for their children, that
Mm,
they can listen to their gut, that if something tells them, this isn't quite right, I don't feel good about this, listen to that. No one is a better authority for your children than you are.
good
Who else
advice.
has all their best interests at heart? And Andy Wakefield has said in one of my films that mothers are the reason humanity has continued, because
Mhm.
mother's intuition has kept people alive. So I
Wow.
really support mothers to listen to that and to overcome their fear, and I support them in their pursuit of anything that's natural.
Mhm.
So homeoprophylaxis is something that, early in the show, I talked about it being not a militaristic paradigm. It's not about killing anything. It's not about fighting or beating anything. It's about supporting the natural, real immunity that we're blessed with.
Okay.
So when you support the terrain and build the terrain, we naturally can interface with microbes in a safe way without succumbing to death or disability.
Okay.
Getting sick is part of being human, and we need that to exercise our immune system. So catching a cold or getting a virus is not necessarily a deadly event. That's
Mhm.
what exercises our immune system. And if your terrain is healthy, that's the basis. So
Okay.
what I do with these young parents through homeoprophylaxis, we call it HP for short, and through general homeopathy care, is we build that terrain. We support the terrain. So we're not fighting anything, we're not preventing anything, we're building something, and we're
Okay.
encouraging the natural health of that individual so they're able to interface with the environment and be healthier.
So you talk about diet and exercise and things like that.
Sure. And many people who come to me are already on board with those things because they
Okay.
wouldn't be seeking out a homeopath if they weren't starting to become aware of
More
healthy
conscious.
life. Yeah,
So do you see more people waking up, like I see people waking up to what's going on in the world and being more aware? Do you see that in your practice as well?
absolutely. Absolutely. I tell people I'm so fortunate because the
Okay.
people I interface with are on the same page. They're looking for these answers, and I'm seeing more and more. My practice is, I'm booked out 2 months.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
People want natural medicine, and they want a practitioner that looks at them and listens to them and individualizes the treatment for them.
Hmm.
So this is essential in healthcare. This is the direction healthcare needs to go, because how many people are dissatisfied with sitting in front of a practitioner whose eyes are on the computer, typing,
I
giving
know.
them the same
Yep.
prescription they're giving to 100 other people with
Yep.
no regard whatsoever to that individual's subjective experience?
Hmm.
That is where medicine is coming from.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I'm with
one
you. Well,
short
no, and I've experienced that myself. I have to tell you that I've experienced that exactly when I've gone to the doctor. And it's been interesting because and when I have been given a natural remedy, I have some arthritis, and my doctor had said at the time, take some turmeric. And I got deathly ill a couple months later, and growing up, diarrhea, everything. And I finally figured out myself it was the turmeric. I was allergic to it, which
oh,
is, yeah, which is crazy. I had to diagnose myself. But then when I did go back to my physician and said, hey, I know you were trying to help me, but it made me deathly ill. My body reacted to it adversely, which I thought was wild. And he didn't acknowledge.
well,
And I
I
was
have a
like,
lot of
well,
thoughts, but one thought is that he
what
doesn't have a lot of training, probably. If this was
in
just a regular
area,
MD, they don't
right?
get any training in nutrition or supplements. They get zero, really. So he knew enough to tell you maybe you should try something, but he didn't know enough to tell you how to deal with what happened.
Yeah, because when I told him what happened, he didn't connect the dots, I guess, is my point. And they were like,
Yeah, I mean,
oh,
that could be the
there's
case.
this or that. Yeah. And they didn't
Right, right.
realize. They didn't realize.
But,
So on a lot of this, go ahead.
you could have a genetic workup done. A lot of people are having their genes mapped, and you could
Okay.
see that you have a sensitivity to turmeric. So
Oh,
you would know that. So,
okay.
there's just nuances that are being explored by functional doctors, homeopaths, naturopaths, chiropractors, all different types of
Right.
other practitioners, things that are being explored that aren't part of a medical school curriculum at all.
Hmm. Well,
So,
and they've gotten away from, and I just want to say this. I like the natural remedies. Like I mentioned before, I'm really into the essential oils. You can use essential oils to heal many things. And I love that. And I think it's great. I know my daughter has used some of the essential oils to heal toothaches and things like that. And I know my granddaughter has had ear issues. She's put little cotton balls with lavender in her ears and different things like that. So, and I've used it myself. I've had a toothache, and instead of running to the dentist, I've grabbed some of my essential oils, and it's wintergreen that I use, and it's also why can't I think of it? I put it in my laundry. Tea tree, different things like that. And I guess over time, as you start to, like, individuals, do they come to you and say, hey, I'm using this, and I'm using that, and I've learned this, and I've learned that?
They do more and more, but my expertise is really, my scope of practice is homeopathy. So
Okay.
I use specifically homeopathic remedies, which are made in homeopathic pharmacies under stringent regulations. They're very specific. All of these
Okay.
other things, I have opinions, because I've done some research, I have clients that use it, but it's
Mhm.
not what I use particularly in my practice.
So tell
So
me how did you start using these different remedies, and talk about this a little bit?
outside of homeopathy, you mean?
Oh, no, I mean homeopathy, what did
Mm.
you got into this work, and then, so if you
Right.
prescribe something, it comes from a different source, I guess is my
Right, it
question.
comes from a homeopathic pharmacy. And
Okay.
homeopathy, it's a 4-year education.
Okay.
And we basically do a deep dive into how to verbally take a case. It's all verbal. We don't do testing, we don't do examinations. What we're trying to understand is the state an individual is in. And by state, I mean, where do they reside mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually? What is it like to be them? What's
Okay.
their subconscious like? Because it's their inner state that is creating the outer being. So
Okay.
if they have arthritis or depression or anxiety or whatever physical, mental, emotional pathology where that has brought them in, that is being generated from an internal state. So
Yes.
where does the internal state come from? It can be through ancestry. We call that miasmatic influence. It can be through accidents or events. We call those befallments.
Mhm.
We can have people that have been never well since a death in the family, or a trauma, or a shock, or a fear. And those play very important roles in general health. So then we find something in nature that, if taken in a material form, would cause all of those symptoms on every level. But we give it in a homeopathic dose, which has been diluted and
Right.
succussed to potentize it. There's no molecules, there's no physical molecules. It's just an energetic impetus that we're giving to the person on a pellet. So then
Mhm.
that tells their body to engage and start the healing process.
Ingenious. It's ingenious because we are made of energy, and
Right,
we are our inside, not our outside. And
right,
that's what's so ingenious about this, because you realize that when people have something wrong, it's because they've internalized, or they've gone through some kind of trauma, and it's their energy
right.
field.
Or
Could
they've been
be their
exposed
energy.
to something,
Right,
right? Maybe
right.
they're exposed to something. Maybe they're living in an environment that's toxic. Many,
Yep.
many things affect our health. So I might have 10 people with a diagnosis. And if they
Mm,
went to a doctor, they'd all get the exact same thing,
right.
because
That's what they
the
know.
training is to suit the diagnosis with the prescription, and
So
then
they can
insurance will pay for it, right? Simple. But for me, those 10 people are going to have 10 different remedies,
different. And
because
you're exactly right. You're exactly right.
it's
So,
customized
oh
for
my God.
them based on their inner state. And then here's the
That's
challenge.
how it should be.
That's how it should be. Absolutely. It's a return to reality. But people
No
are
kidding.
accustomed to taking a pill and having
Right.
something disappear 20 minutes later, because it's being suppressed, basically. So they're
Right.
accustomed to this. So there is a learning curve. They come into a homeopath and it's like, well, it didn't stop in 5 minutes, so it didn't work. And I have to teach them that the body works in a different way.
Right.
It
We'll
can
talk more
take,
about this. I got to go to commercial break, you guys, but we'll be right back here because this is interesting stuff. I totally believe in exactly what you're saying because we have to be in tune with our bodies and that's how we're going to heal them. Hey, this is Nancy. You're out. This is High Road to Humanity, and we will be right back. Hi, this is Nancy. You're out. This is High Road to Humanity. I'm here today with Cilla Whatcott. And, we're talking about the energy in our bodies and the natural healing abilities that come from when you tune into what's really wrong with somebody. You were just
right.
tuning. That is so cool. I mean, they teach you to do the right thing. I believe this wholeheartedly. And it's funny. I just want to get this out. So many people have talked about that your emotions cause a lot of these issues. Louise Hay always talked about heal your body, heal your life, all these things and I will look up, like if I have a backache, I'll open up her book to see what's wrong because I know that it has nothing to do with my back. It has something to do with,
Right.
maybe something else. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Something you've been carrying.
Yeah, like I'm carrying it with me and that's why I have the backache, or maybe I don't feel supported, you know, and all those different things that she talks about, which she was way ahead of her time, is exactly what you're talking about.
Right. And that's the art of healing. It's an art as well as
It
a
is.
science. So,
Yeah.
and homeopathy's been around for 200 years, more than 200 years. It's safe. There's no harm per se
But
from
it's not
homeopathy.
profitable.
Not like some things, right?
So that's what stopped this whole thing is that it's not profitable. But people are searching you out and there are more doctors like you. Is that right?
That's correct.
Tell
That's
me the
correct.
positive. Tell me what's going on in your field right now.
Well, people are seeking homeopathy more and more. It's becoming more popular. People want to be heard. They want to be seen and heard for who they are. Plus, our world is becoming a much more toxic place.
Yep.
So, medicine is becoming more nuanced. Either functional medicine, homeopathy, these things are needed and they work together. They're synergistic. Going to a chiropractor at the same time as seeing a homeopath is beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And people are also taking more responsibility. So they're recognizing that the old paradigm of fix me, going to someone in a white coat and saying, fix me,
Doesn't
it's becoming,
work.
it's antiquated. Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah,
work.
doesn't work. I just want to mention I go to the chiropractor. I used to go every 2 weeks. I've been going like every month now, but I'm better with my core. But my chiropractor has saved my life. He's amazing. He knows exactly. I mean, he adjusts my wrists from being on the computer. He adjusts my neck, my shoulders, my ankles, everything. I feel like a new person when I walk out of there.
It's nice.
It's wonderful. It's absolutely, if you guys, and massage therapy, I just want to bring this up, is amazing because it releases all the energy and all the toxins that are in your body. And so if you can get a massage, even just once a month, it's huge. I want to bring up acupuncture because acupuncture balances your energy fields. There's so many
Right.
different things that you can do if you've never done it before. I always tell everybody, go to the chiropractor and get a massage, if nothing else. What are your feelings on those things?
Right. Yeah, there it's great. And people are making those choices and taking more responsibility. I think that's the most important thing, to take responsibility for our health, not
Mhm.
relinquish it to someone else, not, do your research, do sense your own intuition, determine what feels right for you and seek that out. I think that's essential.
Mhm. Now, during this situation with the pandemic, I'm sure you've had a lot of people come to you and ask you different questions.
Right.
How has that been for you?
I've never had any fear about it because homeopathy's track record with epidemics is stellar, really stellar. So I knew that it could be treated, and I've, treated different people. So that's been very effective. Um, and also in terms of prevention. So for prevention, we look at just building their terrain.
Mhm.
So
Building
we
the immune system.
building the immune system. If you have a strong immune system, and that's what we do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's been very helpful for people, supportive, and an interesting challenge.
Well, yeah, and I've learned more. It's interesting because now that we've had to, I know this all has to do with immunity. I think I had the COVID-19 a couple years ago when it first came, or even before it became popular. My husband came home with a cold and he had it really bad. And then I got it and it was a really bad cold, is what it was. And I got over it. At one point, it was a little scary because I felt a heaviness in my chest, but I kicked it. Now, since then, what has really been interesting is I've noticed different things that I could do to boost my immune system. And it just made me look for different things, and one of them was the mulberry. Is it mulberry or not mulberry, but
Elderberry?
elderberry? Yeah. And I did not know about elderberry. Everybody else seemed to know about elderberry, but I didn't know about it. So if you guys don't know, and it comes in liquid form, or they have little gummies, I think you can take. But I bought the liquid form, and every once in a while, I'll go in my closet and it has a little thing, and it's natural. And I just do if I feel like my immune system's down, I'll just take that.
Hmm.
Um, that's something I never knew about before.
Right,
Talk about stuff like that.
right.
That's
And
stuff we
it's
can do.
easy and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I have a friend who is taking a course in herbalism.
Okay.
And she said to me, it's so amazing. Everything we see when we're walking outside, every weed
Yeah,
has a purpose. And
sure.
those are all medicines. And it's true. That's how the world was intended to be. And
Yes.
then came along pharmaceuticals.
Well, yeah, it's like getting back to basics because I believe, well, of course, and if you look at pharmaceutical drugs, they all are stemming from any drug that you have, it comes from a plant.
Right. But they can't patent that. So then they have to make it chemical. They have to use the chemical equation so they can patent it. But, I would add to say that emergency medicine is wonderful. I mean, that's
Well,
evolved,
sure.
and we can save someone who's in a life-threatening accident, or we can do a heart transplant, and those applications are well needed. But we know that conventional medicine does not treat chronic disease. It's created by the suppression of symptoms with pharmaceuticals,
Mhm.
but there are no treatments for chronic disease. So I get a lot of clients who come to me that have chronic disease and they've been told there's nothing else we can do.
And that's not true. You're able to work with them.
The body is unendingly transformative. We
Mhm.
have a prime directive to evolve and to improve and to move towards perfection. I believe that to my core.
Yep.
So we are always evolving, and the path to that is never a straight road. It's always very circuitous.
Mhm.
But that's where our bodies want to go, given the right support, and um, that's the goal with homeopathy.
Love it. I love it. And when people come in, you talk to them about when they come in and say, well, I have this or that, and you know where it stems from. You're not just helping them physically, you're helping them emotionally too.
Right, because health is all of those things. So we're
Right.
looking at the whole picture. So you may come in with arthritis or headaches or some physical manifestation, but I'm going to
Hmm.
ask you, what makes you happy? What makes you sad? What are good memories? What were you like as a child? How do you sleep? What do you dream about? What kinds of books and movies do you read? What are your relationships like? What's your favorite weather? What are your favorite foods? Do you crave fats? Do you crave sweets? I mean, there's 1,000 things I can learn about you that will
Interesting.
help me to understand what remedy you need,
Wow. You
which will
do
be
Zoom
unique.
consultations or what do you do? I love it. I'm
I
gonna call you
do.
up. Do you
Yeah.
give people your information? Like, how do they find you?
Uh, they
Do you
seem
have
to find me. I'm on a lot of podcasts.
I know, but do you have like, what if they want to book a session with you? Can they email you
Oh,
or?
realimmunity.org, O-R-G,
Okay, realimmunity.org.
.org.
And they ask you the question or they set up a time with you. Are
They
you
can do
doing,
everything on the site. You can schedule on the site. It describes the appointments. It would be, constitutional care, acute care,
okay.
homeoprophylaxis programs, anything people are interested in, it's on the site and explained.
This has got to have been a really interesting journey where you have to feel some kind of gratification that you've gotten to this point where you're helping people.
I'm endlessly fascinated by people. I find people really interesting, and I'm intensely curious about their lives and what's brought them to this point and how they see the world and how they navigate the world. I find that fascinating. So I'm in just the right field for that. And then it's very gratifying to know that sometimes I don't hear from people after they see me, and then I'll bump into them or they'll come back and say, that really helped me 5 years ago. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's great to hear. Cause I
Because you
just didn't
didn't know.
hear it.
But if they
Right.
don't come back, that's kind of a good sign too,
Either
right?
they didn't like me or they were well. So
I
yeah.
love it. I love it. Hey, you guys, if you want to pick up our book, now you have a couple books. Tell us about your books. So you have another one besides this one.
So the first one is a collaboration I wrote with another author. It's called The Solution. And it's also about homeoprophylaxis. And this is my more recent book, There Is a Choice. And there's a
Okay.
lot more detail in this book.
Yeah. And
So
there is
just
a
those two.
choice.
And then I have articles in different places. The Weston A. Price Foundation publishes Wise Traditions. And I have an article coming out about the history of homeopathy in the summer edition this year.
Wonderful. I'll have to check that out. I have to say, I have to commend you on the work you do because I believe in it wholeheartedly. I really
Thank you.
do. Yeah. I mean, I think that all physicians, well, people should do the natural thing. I mean, I think that's how it was intended. I really do. I mean, it's just gotten out of hand. Our medical system has gotten out of hand. It's all about money again, not about people. And, it's supposed to be about people. And there's
Right.
so many, I guess I just want to say this really quick before we get out of here today. There's so many children and people who've been affected by not having the proper care.
Right.
And that's a really hard thing. So, hey, you guys, if you want to get a psychic reading, don't forget to check out my website, nancyyearout.com, and you can go to my calendar and book. And I'm just so happy you were here today. And thank you for coming on the
Thank you,
show.
Nancy. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. Hey, you guys, this is Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity, and we will see you next time. Take care. Bye.
Connect the dots and keep the motion. Can achieve your goal. Let's hit the high road.
Hey, you guys, join me next week on The High Road for more stories filled with wisdom, love, and hope for our future. Have a fabulous week and know that by staying on the high road, you will make it to your destination. Visit my website, nancyyearout.com, where you can book a private session to learn how to tap into your own abilities. And check out my YouTube channel. It's Nancy Yearout's High Road to Humanity.
You can achieve your goal.